Hey everyone, today in this video I'll be going over some tips on how to make some awesome jjamppong. There's so much I could say to making this dish in which I won't be covering all in this video, so if you are still interested, please take a look in the description below. The most important aspect of making a really tasty broth is adding a variety of vegetables. The main taste of the broth comes from the fusion of all the flavors coming from the vegetables. The main ingredients I always put into my jjamppong are onions, mushrooms, zucchinis, carrots, and cabbage. I usually slice them into long strips as seen below so it is easier to eat them with the noodles. Although some may not like this, one other staple ingredient that I'll always add is bamboo shoots. This doesn't affect the taste of the dish, but I do love the texture of these, so if you do not like bamboo shoots or do not want to try them, you do not have to add them in. Another optional ingredient is water chestnuts, and once again, they're mostly added in for the extra crunch. As for the meat, I always put in mixed seafood, and in the mixed seafood, the most important ones are squid, shrimp, mussels, and clam meat. For the actual meat, I use ground pork. Adding ground pork gives the broth a deep, rich flavor. However, if I were to rank the importance of seafood versus ground pork, I would say seafood wins by a ton. I have made jjamppong with only seafood many times and it tastes just as good. However, I do prefer it with the ground pork. Now for the sauces. To get the taste you get in the restaurants, you add the following in equal amounts: oyster sauce, fish sauce, and soy sauce. Regardless of how much I make, I usually start off with a tablespoon of each. As for the soy sauce, the taste is not that really important, so if you don't like soy sauce or you don't have it, you can just add salt to taste at the end. After I add the tablespoon of each, I usually just smell the dish to see how strong it smells like. But if you don't know how jjamppong is supposed to smell like, you can just keep adding a tablespoon of each until it tastes, I guess, right. And as for the oyster sauce, it's less salty compared to the fish sauce. To get the beautiful red color of the soup, Korean red pepper flakes are normally used by Koreans. However, a twist that I started using is paprika powder. I usually use a 2-to-1 ratio for this because the paprika powder just gives this a more smoky flavor that you can't get using an electric stovetop. For the Korean red pepper flakes, you can use the fine ground ones or the coarser kind. But I do recommend using fine ground, and if coarse ground is all you have, you should definitely add the paprika powder to get the red color. Now that we have gone over all the ingredients you need, let's go over the technique to get the red chili oil. First, you want to drizzle a healthy amount of oil. I usually use olive oil, but any oil would do. The oil you use is not very important. After the wok heats up, add the meat. If you don't want to add meat, you can add the vegetables right away. When I'm cooking the meat, I sometimes add finely chopped green onions, ginger powder, and garlic powder for a better aroma. After the meat is mostly cooked, add the vegetables. Since we are using a lot of different types of vegetables, you need a lot of each. The amount I am making right now is enough for about 6 to 7 people. When you're sauteing, you want to make sure that there is a good layer of oil in the pan. If there is not, you have to add some more so that there is at least an inch of oil. But if you add too much oil, then the soup will be oily. You can add the seafood now or saute for a bit or add them later once the water is added in later on. Now you want to turn down the heat a little bit and add the chili flakes or paprika powder. You want to turn down the heat so that the chili flakes do not burn. You want to add enough so that all the vegetables are red, or mostly red, like a paste. Like the sauces, I start by adding a tablespoon of each until I reach that nice red color that I was talking about. Next, we will add the sauces. Start by adding a tablespoon of each. It should be kind of salty right now as you didn't add any of the water, but that is fine. It is also fine if it is bland because you can add more fish sauce or oyster sauce later too. I usually add 2 tablespoons of each for the amount I am making right now, then add some salt. I don't like my jjamppong being too fishy, so I'd be careful on the fish sauce. Now that we added the sauces in, it is time to add the water. I usually make broth ahead of time using dried anchovies, kelps, and radish, but that is not necessary at all. And for this video, I just used water. When you add water, you want to add only a little bit at a time so that the flavor from the vegetables and seafood has time to absorb the flavor from the vegetables and the seafood. I usually add about a cup at a time and boil for a few minutes, then add a little more, then a little more. The biggest mistake you can add at this point is to add too much water all at once, and the soup becomes really bland and watery, not the thicker and deeper soup we're going for. Okay, now you can taste your soup, and if it's too bland, you can add a teaspoon of salt or more oyster sauce or whatever it is you desire. If you want a funkier flavor, I recommend to add more oyster sauce and fish sauce. What you don't want to do now is add more pepper flakes, because the pepper flakes will not incorporate into the soup and will just float around like flakes. Now that the soup is all done, you can use jjamppong or jjajang noodles, udon noodles, or ramen noodles for the noodles. You can also just eat the soup with rice. I find that really good the next day if I have some left over. But overall, it's a pretty flexible dish in which you can make it as spicy as you want, as salty as you want. You can add as much seafood as you want, or pork, or you can take out the pork altogether. Just anything you really want to do. So thank you for watching, and please leave a comment down below to tell me how your jjamppong turned out.